Most people hit their 40s and quietly wonder if the life they built is actually the one they wanted. They keep showing up, keep collecting the paycheck, keep telling themselves it's enough. Sean Stockman was doing exactly that. 20 plus years deep in corporate America, a stable career, a good salary, a life that looked perfect from the outside. But something was eating at him, and one afternoon, driving through Detroit, he made a split-second decision that most people would have ignored. He pulled over, and that single moment didn't just change his life, it built a movement that nobody saw coming. Before the mower, before the million subscribers, before Detroit knew his name, Sean Stockman was just another guy in a suit, sitting in meetings he didn't care about anymore. For over 2 decades, he was embedded in Detroit's corporate automotive world, working in purchasing for large multinational companies. It was the kind of career people spend their whole lives chasing. He traveled the world on the company's dime, earned a salary that provided well for his wife Tessa and their 4 kids, and by every external measure, he had made it. Stable, successful, sorted. But underneath all of it, something wasn't right. Sean has openly talked about the imposter syndrome that followed him through those 20-plus years, that quiet, nagging feeling that despite the title, the salary, and the corner office, he didn't quite belong there. He was good at the job, he just didn't love it. And it showed. By the time the channel started pulling his attention, colleagues and managers alike noticed he was doing the minimum, coasting, going through the motions while his real energy was being poured somewhere else entirely on weekends. He also had a side skill most people didn't know about: professional video editing, specifically from years working in the wedding industry. The camera instincts were always there. He just hadn't yet found the story worth telling. That was about to change. To understand why Sean Stockman walked away from everything, you have to go back to when he was 10 years old. His father died of cancer at just 35. Not an old man, not someone who had lived a full life and faded out quietly. 35, younger than most people are when they land their first serious job. Sean was left without a father at an age when a boy needs one most. And that loss didn't just hurt, it shaped everything that came after. He's talked about it plainly. My dad died of cancer when he was only 35. Losing him made me realize I have just one life, and I want my story to look different. That line isn't just a quote, it's the entire philosophy behind Midlife Stockman in 9 words. His father-in-law stepped in to fill that gap, becoming the father figure Sean never got to keep. It was him who passed down the hands-on practical skills, fixing things, building things, working with your hands, the exact skills Sean would later use to transform hundreds of neglected properties across Detroit. And then there's the vulnerability. Sean has always been upfront about his struggles, his doubts, and his failures. He said it himself. If you knew him well, the first thing you'd say is that he's vulnerable. He doesn't perform strength, he just shows up honest. That combination, loss, purpose, and raw authenticity, would become the foundation of everything. Nobody plans a life-changing moment. They just happen, usually on a random afternoon when you're not paying attention. Sean was driving through Detroit when he passed an abandoned preschool. Overgrown, neglected, the kind of place most people slow down to look at and then keep driving. Sean didn't keep driving. He pulled over, got out, and started cleaning it up. No camera, no audience, no plan, just a man who couldn't walk past a mess and do nothing about it. That one act unlocked something he hadn't felt in years. He described it simply. It was going to be a good way to get out his energy, and it was going to look great for the neighborhood. No grand vision, no viral strategy, just a gut feeling that this was worth doing. So he went back, then he went back again, and at some point he grabbed his phone, propped it on a tripod, and started filming. Not because he thought it would blow up, not because he had a content plan, but because he had spent years editing other people's stories, and something told him this one was finally worth documenting. The footage was raw, unpolished, nothing like the clean professional work he had produced in his wedding video days. Sweat, overgrown grass, debris, and the genuine faces of people who hadn't expected anyone to show up for them. Turns out, that was exactly what the internet was waiting for. While Sean was spending his weekends transforming Detroit's forgotten lots, something was quietly unraveling at the office. His managers started noticing. The guy who had spent over 2 decades in corporate purchasing wasn't showing up the same way anymore. The effort wasn't there. The drive had shifted, and the reason wasn't hard to find. They had seen the videos. His bosses knew exactly where his energy was going. What happened next is the part most people don't expect. They didn't pull him into a disciplinary meeting. They didn't issue a warning. Instead, they told him he had something, that he should pursue it. His own employers, the people who had every reason to want him focused on purchasing contracts, looked him in the eye and essentially told him to go follow the mower. That moment made the decision both easier and harder at the same time. Easier because even the people who would lose him could see what he was building. Harder because walking away from a 20-plus year career with a wife, 4 kids, and a mortgage isn't a leap, it's a free fall. Sean has described it as the most terrifying thing he'd ever done. His entire adult life, someone else had been signing his paycheck. Now, for the first time, nobody was. No salary, no safety net, no guarantee that the views would keep coming. Just a phone, a zero-turn mower, and a city full of yards that needed attention. From day one, Sean made a decision that most people in his position wouldn't even consider. He wasn't going to charge a single dollar. Every property he showed up to was free. No invoices, no sliding scale, no exceptions. His targets were the people nobody else was coming for, the elderly residents who couldn't physically manage their own yards anymore, the disabled homeowners who had watched their properties deteriorate for years, the families stretched too thin financially to hire anyone, the people who had quietly stopped expecting help. And he didn't just mow. That framing undersells what he was actually doing out there. Sean was fixing fences, building stairs, clearing out dangerous debris, hauling away years' worth of neglect in a single afternoon. He's asked himself out loud, if this were my home, what would I want it to look like? What would I want for my kids in the backyard? That personal lens drove every cleanup, whether the cameras were rolling or not. Detroit's local news station WDIV eventually caught wind of what he was doing and sent a crew out. They dubbed him Detroit's Mr. Clean. One resident he showed up for unannounced thought he was trying to sell her cable. When she realized he was just there to help, no catch, no charge, nothing owed, she was stunned. Sean doesn't talk much about his faith on camera. He said he'd rather his actions do that talking. In Detroit, they were speaking loud enough for the whole city to hear. Here's the thing nobody tells you about going viral. Sometimes the worst production quality is the best strategy. Sean Stockman had spent years editing polished, professional wedding videos. He knew exactly what high-quality content looked like, and when he started filming himself hauling trash out of abandoned Detroit lots, he deliberately left all of that behind. No professional lighting, no crisp audio setup, no carefully composed shots, just a phone propped on a tripod and whatever natural light Detroit was offering that day. He's been asked about it. His answer is simple. People aren't going to respond more because your camera is crisper or your sound is better. What they respond to is seeing something genuine, someone who isn't performing, someone who isn't trying to be anything other than exactly who they are. The audience that found him first wasn't the one anyone predicted. YouTube's typical sweet spot skews young. Teenagers, 20-somethings, the algorithm-chasing demographic that keeps the platform running. Midlife Stockman's core viewers turned out to be 55 and older. A demographic that doesn't usually drive viral growth on YouTube found something in Sean's videos they couldn't get anywhere else. Realness, community, and the quiet satisfaction of watching something neglected become something cared for. The channel crossed 600,000 subscribers, then 800,000, then it was sitting right on the edge of 1 million, with a community that had stopped feeling like an audience and started feeling like a movement. The milestone was coming, and when it arrived, Sean made sure nobody celebrated alone. When the Midlife Stockman channel crossed 1 million subscribers, Sean didn't pop champagne and call it his achievement. He was very clear about that. The milestone belonged to the community. Every person who had shared a video, sent a message, or shown up in the comments week after week. He wasn't celebrating a number. He was celebrating what that number represented. The MLS community, as his audience had come to be known, wasn't just watching, they were funding the mission. Through Patreon memberships and merchandise sales, viewers from around the world were directly paying for the equipment, the supplies, and the resources that kept every single cleanup completely free for the people who needed it. The audience had become the engine, and the reach had stretched far beyond Detroit. Sean's newsletter was filling up with stories from people across the globe. Viewers who had been inspired to go clean up their own neighbor's yard, pick up trash on their street, or simply knock on an elderly neighbor's door and ask if they needed anything. The ripple effect of one man stopping for an abandoned preschool was now being felt in countries Sean had never set foot in. Detroit's local media had embraced him as a symbol of the city's resilience. A place that the world had spent decades writing off was producing one of YouTube's most unlikely success stories. Not perfect, but better. 4 words that had started as a cleanup sign-off had quietly become a philosophy that a million people were living by. Sean Stockman didn't sit down one day and plan a movement. He just couldn't drive past a mess without doing something about it. That instinct, the one most people suppress because they're too busy, too tired, or too focused on their own lives, turned out to be worth more than 2 decades of corporate success ever were. He traded a salary for a shovel, a career for a calling, and a corner office for the streets of Detroit. And somewhere along the way, a million people decided they wanted to be part of it. Sometimes the biggest decisions don't feel like decisions at all.